Hello everyone! In this video, we will see and learn together about the English literature history. So, I will explain the story or event of the era in history of English literature. Okay, before we start to watch the unique story, I will show you the timeline of the history. This is the period and the year of English literature. The explanation in this video not include all of this period. There is just a briefly explanation of some period or era, from the Old English era until the Revolution and Restoration era. Okay, so we will see and learn the history from the characteristic of the era and the literary works, the famous authors and their works, and yeah, because this tells about the past, there will be a reflection or lesson to be learned from the events that occur in each era at the time. Okay, first era is Old English. Initially, the British Isles were populated by various races. Predominant is the Iberians. In the 7th to 3rd before century, the Celts came to the place. They were a group of people loosely tied by similar language, religion, and cultural expression. They were spread out across a vast area of continental Europe. They lived by farming, raising livestock, hunting, and fishing. They adhered to the flow of paganism. The Celts lived in well-organized societies with strict laws. Most of the population lived in scattered and isolated farming communities. Their villages were surrounded by banks with wattle fencing. In 55 and 54 AD, then the Romans, led by Julius Caesar, invaded the Britain. Roman civilization influenced their lives. Christianity began to spread among them. Then, in the 5th century, the era of Old English began. Germanic families who invaded or colonized the British nation. They are the people from mainland Europe. Northern Europe consists of three tribes: Jutes, Angles, and Saxons. Then they formed an empire called Anglo-Saxon Heptarchy. The Celts, who were built on the island of England, went to Ireland and Scotland. They ran to the north. The characteristic of the works. Okay, the literature, which was originally in the form of oral form, began to be written down by clergy. The literary works is come from the folklore and folktale of Celt people. Their earliest oral poetry and the dominant theme is heroic age or heroic culture. For example, is Beowulf, the oldest surviving Germanic epic and the longest Old English poem. One of the famous authors from this era is Venerable Bede. He is prose writer from Northumbria. His best work is Ecclesiastical History of the English People. It was created in 731. The story of the conflict between Romans and Celtic Christians. The other authors is Alfred supports the use of the Old English language. He proposing the primary education must be conducted in Old English rather than the Latin. He also promoted the literacy. He translated a number of important books into the Old English language. Okay, we move to the medieval era or the Middle Ages era. Okay, the next era beginning with the conquest by the Normans in mainland England. Occurs on 14th of October 1066 AD. Is known by the name is the Battle of Hastings. This conquest was led by William II of Normandy, a cousin of King Edward, who didn't accept if Harold called Vincent of the Saxon became a king. Then he win and officially became a king on 25th of December 1066. After William the Conqueror died, he was replaced by the successor of William Rufus. Then the next king is Henry I. In language, the king who uses Normandy is followed by the elite and the royal family, but the Old English still used by the monasteries. The people generally plant or modified their old language with additional French words. At this time, there was also the Crusades, or the birth of the British Constitution, Magna Carta. This is the application and rights to the rules include the king and the parliament. And then the end of this century is the introduction of printing technology or printing press for the first time. And also at the time the strength, the influence of the church in controlling power of England. Okay, we move to the literature. In this era, the literature experienced decline, was passive and unproductive. Only a few literary works were produced until the 12th century began to appear works that were created describing the development of the English language. English consolidation or a new English is being the standard language replacing French and Latin. This language also later became the origin of Canterbury Standard, a language that absorbed a lot of French vocabulary and removes some German words. Literary works of this era have the theme of love and adventure and religion. Poetry consists of romantic metrics, a long narrative poem about love and adventure. The story of a hero whose night they save women from the danger and trouble. Okay, next, the famous author is the Geoffrey Chaucer, poet and a writer of fiction. He is also a businessman, government, traveler, and soldier. Yeah, he is the multi-talented person. One of the work is the Canterbury Tales, written since the 13th and HT, contains 17 narrative poems. Even so, there are also stories from the aristocrats. There is also a popular ballad or folk ballad, composition and its origin unknown, which is famous from this era, namely Robin Hood, a story from the 14th century. The main character is a good criminal because he shares the proceeds of his plunder from the rich to the poor people. He protected women and never took away the property of the poor. In world famous prose is John Wycliffe. He criticized the authority of the church in Rome, rejecting the doctrine and criticizing the church bureaucracy. And the drama, there are also plays, but they are only used as a spiritual medium in explaining the sermon in church. Divided into two kinds, first is the miracles to carry out people's lives in holy. Then the mysteries, which take themes from the Bible. Examples of plays such as The Birth of Christ are staged at Christmas. The next era is the Renaissance. During the Renaissance, England was controlled by the Tudor dynasty. These are the rule of the era. In the Latin word Renaissance, it means rebirth. It called rebirth because it's the return of the influence of ancient Greek and Roman in art and culture, and the emergence of the church influence in the social life of society. This movement was born in Italy then spread throughout Europe. And before the 14th century, Europe was in a dark age. Culture and science didn't develop in this period. And then in the Renaissance, science and knowledge in Europe start growing rapidly. After all, the students and thinkers experience limitation by church and religion. Much knowledge has been learned and modified from the work of ancient Greek and Roman and Ottoman Empire. This period is also the period of birth and development of the humanism thought. Humanism emphasizes that humans are the center of the universe. Humans must be independent and tied to life out of their destiny, not only depend on. Okay, the development of science then gave birth to famous scientists and contributed to human life, like the Copernicus and Galileo Galilei. It was during the time that the famous poet and author William Shakespeare was born, whose his works we know until today. He is the most greatest writer and dramatic English that has written and created so many literary works in his life. He is productive and multi-talented author. His famous work that we know until today is Romeo and Juliet. It is a tragic love story. Okay, guys, humans have a character that wants to stand up for themselves. From the era of Renaissance to the present, this is the forerunner of modern humanism. Okay, as we know, modern humans become arrogant and don't care about the circumstances around them. They destroy the nature and forgetting that it's not only themselves that lives in the world, but also the other creatures, such as plants and animals, and often they overexploit the nature. Okay, the last but not least, the Revolution and Restoration era. In this era, a civil war broke out, and in 1649, the King Charles I, was executed with Archbishop Laud. Their effort to reach their status to assert the principle of uniformity in the church was considered by the Puritans dominant as a form of betrayal of their country. Then the British Empire was led by Oliver Cromwell, a Puritan general. He refused the offer of a supposedly divine crown tree. After he died and the throne was handed over to Charles I's son, King Charles II, he returned from exile and took the British crown. The British form of government returned to the monarchy, and the English church was also restored. Charles attempted to maintain a dual policy of supporting the national church and the bishops as idols of religious tolerance. At this time, there was a great philosophical and intellectual architect, Thomas Hobbes. He wrote a book titled Leviathan. He constantly observed irrational animals whose actions were determined by aggression rather than love, by greed and not of generosity for self-interest rather than by altruistic ideals. This era, writers and playwrights used satire to voice a problem in society and criticize the government in comical manner. During this era, the theater institution, Callas to reopen public theater in 1660. The women were allowed to perform on the stage for the first time. Finally, we know and learn that the Civil War is a form of damage caused by humans themselves. Greed can be self-defeating. Hobbes believes that the appetite is the strongest driving force in human behavior, and if it is allowed to, we will destroy what we value most because of our overwhelming competitive greed. Human actions can destroy nature and human life itself, so that we need to respect nature more and control technological progress, not be overly or greedy in exploiting the nature because it will bring the destruction. So, guys, the literature does have an influence on our everyday life. Although many consider literary works just an imagination thought, but it is actually produced by the reflection on the experience, ideology, and background of the author. The literary works can transform moral values into the every reader or viewer around the world. Okay, thank you for watching.